What's checking, everybody? It's time for our weekly prize pick show. Usually it's our prediction show, but now that the Texas football season is over, we'll just be focusing on prize picks the rest of the way throughout the football season, which is not something that stresses any of the guys on the Orange Blood staff. We all love talking about prize picks and our favorite picks for the weekend. And Alex, if you don't mind, I'll go first today because I want to go to the World Cup.
I love it, man.
I've treated you well on the World Cup so far this year, have I not?
Have you? Who's that guy's name?
Mbappe. I'm literally going right back to the Kylian Mbappe train again. Alex.
I say,
let me get my pen and paper. Hold on.
Mbappe, whatever, man.
Mbappe. They've got a couple of interesting. If Mbappe was by himself and it was a 0.5 more or less on goals, I'd be like, take the more and run with it. He's been on an absolute heater in this World Cup. But they've got a really nice looking Kylian Mbappe plus Cody Gakpo of the Netherlands for 0.5 goals. All you need is one of those two to score a goal on Friday. And I think both of those guys are capable of, if you had either of those two guys at 0.5, you'd probably lean towards taking the more. That you get both of those guys combined together, all you got to do is get one goal from the pair. I like that pair plus the more. There's also a Memphis Depay.
Hold on. Who is it? Is it Julian Alvarez and Kylian Mbappe?
No, go a little bit further down. It's Cody Gakpo.
Gakpo. Mbappe. All right.
Got it. Alex and I don't know shit about soccer.
Yeah. No, it's okay. The thing about Cody Gakpo, there's a couple of the Mbappe plays that include various players. Gakpo, for me, is the most likely of the pairings that they've got with Mbappe on this promotion. He's the one for me that's most likely to score versus Julian Alvarez or Memphis Depay. So,
Jason, are you just gonna mix that with the Justin Herbert free square they're offering this week?
You read my mind, brother.
I was thinking about it. For those that don't know, if you go over to the NFL section on PrizePicks all the way up until Sunday night, they've got a 0.5 passing yards promo with Justin Herbert. So you can combine any of these that you love with Herbert, make it maybe like a little twofer and try to triple your money up. Or if you want to go big or go home, maybe try to go 5 or 6 of these paired up. But yeah, Justin Herbert, there is several days worth of time left to get your pick in combined with Justin Herbert. Couple more World Cup picks before we move on to the NFL. In part because we're talking about games on Friday right now. Shots on target is always a tricky one. They've got Richarlison from Brazil at 1 shot on target. That seems like a layup for me. I mean, at worst, he's going to get 1. So the question is he going to get more than 1? If nothing else, I think your worst case on taking Richarlison, 1.0 shots on target, I think the worst thing that happens is that's a push. So if you're looking to make some 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 play entries, I think Richarlison's a push at worst, which means all that would do is water down your bet and not necessarily ding you with a miss if you're trying to find some of these multiple player entries for the big payouts. Richarlison at 1.0 shots on target for Friday's game against Croatia. That sticks out to me. And then you could probably do worse with taking the more with both Neymar and Messi in their quarterfinal matchups. We're not talking about goals. We're just talking about shots on target. It's hard for me to think that Lionel Messi wouldn't have at least 2 shots on target in what will be one of the biggest games of his life. Don't know if he scores, but this could be, we're at this point now where Lionel Messi, the greatest player of all time in soccer, is potentially in one of his last World Cup games if he loses. that dude ain't losing without taking a few pot shots at the goal that at the very least the goalie has to make a stop on. Other than that, I'm always
catch Neymar
and Lionel Messi.
Okay, I see him. Yeah. Wouldn't know either one of them. They smacked me in the face, but
how do you not know who Lionel Messi is?
I think I've heard the name, but
you've heard the name. All right, I'm going to give you one more from the World Cup for Friday that I really, really like for the same reasons that I outlined with Richarlison. I just almost don't know how it's possible that this guy doesn't at least hit the minimum number. Cody Gakpo, going back to him, the guy that I thought you should pair up with Kylian Mbappe. If you go to the shots selections, they've got a more or less of 1.0 shots. Not shots on target, not goals. He just has to swing his foot and kick a ball at the damn net. Cody Gakpo, 1.0 shots. As I mentioned, he's a guy that if we were talking about 0.5 goals, I'd almost be inclined to take the more on that to get a 1.0 shots. I mean, that guy's going to accidentally take a shot. I don't know whether he scores or not, but to see 1.0 on the shots, again, at worst, you're getting a push there and getting refunded back the cost going in to include him on the pick. So I like Cody Gakpo with the 1.0 shots. I will come back next week and throw myself on the sword if for some reason I lead you astray on the 1.0 shots by either Gakpo or Richarlison.
Love it.
So those are my favorite World Cup picks. Alex, I'll go to you on the NFL side of thing. You've been really hot. I mean, you were about at 80% last week, maybe even 90% with the plays the entries that you recommended. Anything jump out for you? I know we were talking about a few of these Garrett Wilson's there's a couple of guys you might as well continue to ride the train with.
Yeah, well, Garrett Wilson's not the lock that he was last week, but I feel like Amon-Ra St. Brown until they start saying they're going to be projecting him for, I guess now they are projecting him at like 7 catches, but still until they start putting him like 100 yards a week or something like that, it's like I'm just going to keep taking the overs with him. But one specific situation that actually, I guess, tangentially involves Amon-Ra St. Brown, just my one correlation play from this week. It has to do with projection and just also a theme that we always talk about, right? The Magic Mario Kart Lions, right? It's just you want to play the Lions and you want to play in a dome, right? Like, and we're going to get that this week. Let me just pull up my projection sheet just real quick so I can make sure that I have everything right, because I'm trying to figure out that game. Is that, well, it's in a dome either way, right? But is that game at Ford Field or is that game in Minnesota?
I'm going to look it up right now for you.
Ford Field's in Detroit.
Okay. For some reason, I don't have my ats pulled into this thing. Regardless, so they have Kirk Cousins right here. If you go to passing attempts, Kirk Cousins, they had, I remember being low, 35.5. We have that thing projected at more like 42. The first time that these two teams faced one another, I think that was a 28-24 ball game. Kirk Cousins got off at 40. He got off 41 passing attempts in that game. If you look at teams that have played against the Detroit Lions, quarterbacks have been over their expectation in pass attempts in every single game. This is number one matchup for opposing quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins is going to throw more than 35 passes in this game. Like that's going to happen. And the main beneficiary is going to be Justin Jefferson, who gets a great matchup himself. I'm not going to go with the receptions over or the fantasy points over, because you never know when that touchdown is going to come. But geez, his receiving yards more or less is, what was that at? Justin Jefferson. was I guess I can just search for his name.
93.5, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, we have that thing more like 116 is where it should be. That line is probably about 25 yards off from where it should be. So I'm going to correlate the Kirk Cousins play. Kirk Cousins over in passing attempts. I'm betting on a lot. I'm not saying I'm betting on this site, but I'm saying in my daily fantasy entry, what I'm betting on happening is that I'm going to see Kirk Cousins go to a pass rate over expectation in this game. If he goes to a pass rate over expectation in this game, he is surely going to have more than 35.5 pass attempts. And the main beneficiary of that, and what is a very, very narrow target tree, is going to be Justin Jefferson, who's going to go over 93.5 receiving yards. Whether that's in comeback mode or whatever mode that's in, there's a lot of points going to be scored in this game. One of the highest over-unders of the whole week. Let me just is it the highest over-under? Let me get that pulled up. I mean, this is a game where there's going to be a lot of points scored.
52 is what I'm showing.
Oh yeah, 52 and a half. That's got to be the highest of the week. Let's see. We have 43 and a half, 47,
Dolphins Chargers 51 and a half.
52 and a half is the highest, except for yep, you're right. Dolphins and Chargers is 51 and a half. So the one thing I'll say is that I can't believe – I'd just be interested to hear what you guys say about this. Not that it has to do with PrizePicks, but I think it's interesting that the Lions here are a 2-point favorite, considering the fact that – yeah, just considering the fact that Minnesota is one of the best teams in the NFC. And
Dan Campbell's boys have been playing good football the last month and
change. Yeah. But, I mean, it just goes to show, though, that this could be a situation where Minnesota's having to throw to keep up. So I really like Cousins, this very simple pick. Cousins more on the passing attempts.
The Lions score a lot of points when they're playing at home in the Silver Dome.
Yeah, and in domes in general.
So it's either going to be high, either high scoring or at worst, you would think that the Vikings would be playing catch up if it's not a high scoring shootout game. And the Lions have been playing at a pace lately. Jared Goff playing really good football, surprisingly. They run the ball. Like I'm with you on sticking with the Vikings there. Can I give you another one, Alex? There's no correlation to this. There's just in 5 of CeeDee Lamb's last 6 games, he's gone for more than 70 yards receiving, including a couple 100 yards, 150-yard game in there. Cowboys playing the Texans on Sunday. CeeDee Lamb's numbers at 69.5. Feels
like a trap almost. It feels like that's almost too low. They kind of want you to take the Chiefs.
It makes me – the only thing that worries me about that is that they –
but don't break defense. Like,
I worry that the Cowboys would get up too much too soon. Mm-hmm. And in the second, like he could have 50 receiving yards at halftime, but then by the end of the third quarter, he's not in the game. That's the only thing that gives me hesitancy on the 69.5. But CeeDee Lamb's been playing at like a borderline all-pro level. Like he's not going to be one of the top 2 or 3 guys in football. But, I think when the Pro Bowl stuff comes out a little bit later on this month, he's going to make the Pro Bowl. He'll be one of the top 4 receivers, I think, in the NFC. Obviously, Justin Jefferson. There's a number of good guys that will be up for contention. But CeeDee Lamb's having a really good season, probably going to finish between 1,300 and 1,400 yards receiving. And this game against the Texans feels like it should be shooting for the layup line for the Cowboys, given how well they've been playing on offense lately. So the CeeDee Lamb's – what's that?
I have him for 84 for what it's worth, even given the game script conditions.
So, yeah, I think 69.5 is a little low, and I'll be taking advantage of that before it goes up, because I wouldn't be surprised if by Sunday that's closer to 80 than it is 69.5. I can see by Sunday that being 79.5. Any others, Alex?
Well, there were just some that I looked at. I think that you can wrap in, like we mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think you can wrap that in with the Cousins thing if you're just figuring that game is going to be a game that shoots out and it's a back-and-forth affair. We talked about it last week with the Christian Kirk stuff. Unfortunately, Trevor Lawrence didn't get there. He was injured and kind of banged up there for some of it. But we talked about Christian Kirk, Trevor Lawrence, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think you could throw Amon-Ra St. Brown in with the Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson stuff as well. Let me just pull it up because there were some that I did notice with the fantasy scores. let's see. The one I'm most interested to see is and this is a player who I never ever like, and they don't have him up yet because they're still waiting on the status of Damian Harris. But I think if Ramondre Stevenson versus Arizona comes in at anything less than 19.5, or so, anything under 20 fantasy points for Ramondre Stevenson, if it comes in, I'll be taking the more on that. His usage with no Damian Harris has just been so outrageous, and I don't feel like he's gonna go this week. We've gotten the practice reports today saying both he and Jacoby Myers have missed practice, and Jacoby Myers missing practice is a pretty big deal for Ramondre Stevenson as well, with all those targets that he gets kind of over the middle and in the intermediate part of the field as an extension of the run. Let's see, looking at some of these other guys.
Can I give you a fantasy score?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
You were 100% right last week on AJ Brown in the Revenge Bowl. Yeah. I mean, so right that it's almost ridiculous at how low the fantasy score was set for him last week.
Yeah.
He's at 15.5 on the fantasy score this week. And that's a number that I think he can hit without scoring a touchdown. He's so red zone dominant at times he scores. So I'm looking at the other receivers. Devontae Smith is at 13.5 for the Eagles. And for only 2 points more, you can get AJ Brown. Of all the fantasy scores that they have listed so far, he's the one that jumps out a little bit, mainly because I took advantage of your advice last week and went big on AJ Brown, and he paid off.
He's only gone over that number once in the last 4.
Really?
And that was last week. In the last 5, he's done it twice, but he got 15.9, so he barely made it. So last week he went off, but he's only done it. That's the only time he's done it in the last 4 weeks.
Here's one. What about in that same game? We mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown, but what about DJ Chark and a more or less of 7? I mean, that's one that I look at and I say this is the best matchup in the league for opposing wide receivers here in the Minnesota Vikings. DJ Chark's making his way back. I understand that the Lions will be getting Jameson Williams this week, and that could, bite into the target shares here for some of these guys. But it doesn't look like Josh Reynolds is going to play. DJ Chark more involved last week. He actually ended up getting the touchdown. I think 7 points for him is pretty much a pretty easy layup kind of play. And then I just kind of want to go through these fantasy scores and do like I did last week and say the ones that I think are just too high, right? Maybe wants to go under on, because I did hit 5 out of 6 of my unders last week, which was just so tilting. That Marquez Valdez-Scantling game. I hit 5 in the early window, and my 6th one on my $20 bet to make me $500. It could have paid for half of this AC that went out. I'm having to keep my windows open when it's 78 degrees in December. But all right, so some of these that I think look like they could go under this week. I'm not sure how much I love Devin Singletary, even at 10 fantasy points straight up versus the New York Jets. I'm really worried about how much they've begun to integrate James Cook, and also now they're starting to have some Nyheim Hines stuff. That's not an easy front to run on. This doesn't feel like a Singletary game for me. I might go under on him despite that number being pretty low. I don't love this, but I think Gabe Davis could certainly go under 10 fantasy points. Deshaun Watson, I would take the less than 17.5 fantasy points. To me, that just feels like a game where they're going to take the air out of the football and try and keep it away from Joe Burrow. Let's see here. Man, with that being said, I think I would correlate Amari Cooper under the 14.5 fantasy points with him. So I think that's what I would do. Yeah.
Watson's going to play better than he did last week, and they're going to be playing from behind. So I'm going more.
I'm not so sure of that.
Can't be any worse than he was last week. So.
Well, no, they can't. That is true. But in their last 5 meetings, Cleveland has straight up beat Cincinnati. This is the second time that these two teams have played. It's that Cleveland defense we saw last week was capable of taking over a football game against a admittedly very bad team, but doing it even with Deshaun Watson looking like the worst quarterback in the NFL. It's a good team. I think if they could take the air out of the football, really run on Cincinnati, I think that Deshaun Watson could come out of this game with a win and still not put up the fantasy numbers. But obviously it could go your way, where they're having to throw like crazy in the second half. Trevor Lawrence. Hey, how about this one? Ryan Tannehill with no Treylon Burks, a 15 fantasy score under. A banged up Zay Jones at 10 fantasy points. I don't think I would go under on that one. Jalen Hurts, boy, they're coming in hot with him at 24.5. I think I'm not going to take the under on him. Daniel Jones versus Philly at 16 points. That's an under. Am I to 6 yet? I think I'm at 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what I would look at there. Also, Darius Slayton, I'd correlate that with Daniel Jones. I don't like either of those guys versus Philly this week.
I've got one last non-NFL pick. If you care about the UFC at all this weekend and you're looking for just a little bit of action, I kind of like the fight time between Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon. Now, I've been watching Paddy Pimblett fight because he's a Liverpool guy and he's pretty entertaining, but he's moving up in class, Alex, from fighting kind of these tomato cans, and now he's fighting legit fighters. It's not quite as easy for him to just knock guys out anymore. Like, he's playing guys that try to get him on the ground, and his last fight went a little bit longer than the fight before that and kind of the fight before that. The guy that he's fighting this weekend, Jared Gordon, I looked it up. 4 of his last 5 fights have all gone the distance. So if you go look at fight time on that fight, it's listed at 11.0, which means 1 minute into the third round. I'm just saying what I will do is I will have some action this weekend on the Paddy Pimblett fight going more than 11 minutes, given the fact that the style of the guy that he's fighting oftentimes leads to decisions instead of stoppages. So that's
Paddy Pimblett. All right.
Paddy Pimblett, take the more on the fight time with Jared Gordon, because I think that one may go the distance this weekend. If not, everything about those two fighters probably suggests that if there is a knockout, it will occur in the third round, which would get you over the more in time-wise ananyway.
Love it.
Paddy Pimblett is banned from Twitter. That's the news story that comes up from 7 hours ago. It's like, I remember he's a new face for me. Wasn't he just acting like a total goofball in his press conferences and things, right?
He says a lot.
Yeah, I remember.
He's a character. Yeah. He's kind of like the people's champion because he's very much, he'll say 9 things out of 10 that are supportive of people in need, food banks, hungry people who are in dire situations. But that 10th take could be anything, including apparently something that would get him thrown off of Twitter, which seems, that's hard to do under Twitter's new leadership. I mean, if you're getting banned for Twitter now, I don't even know what he did, but I'm afraid to look it up.
You gotta be going hard, man. You gotta be going
hard.
You
have to be going hard. Yeah. Elon's about letting people go hard, and Patty apparently went too hard. Yeah. Patty the baddie, though. Again, I like the more on that fight time. That's the very first thing that I looked at was how long they thought that fight might go. 11.0, I think. And that might be a co-main event, if I'm not mistaken, which would make that up to 5 rounds potentially. So I really like the more on the 11.0 minutes on that. You guys got anything else, or we can wrap this bad boy up?
I've just been taking notes the whole time.
Daniel Jones, go less, man. I mean,
less on the Giants in their matchup against the Eagles. Again, go to PrizePicks, the sponsor of this, obviously. They will 100% match your initial deposit up to $100. Use that promo code OrangeBloods so that they know that you've been watching this video and you were incentivized by us to go make some entries. For myself, for Alex and Jason, and Anwar's not here, but who wishes he was. We'll see you guys next week. Later.